Weight Shift Control 8.2 The National Airspace System. Special Use Airspace is a term used for designated airspace where specific activities must be confined or where certain limitations are imposed on aircraft operations. This type of airspace typically includes prohibited areas, restricted areas, warning areas, military operation areas, MOAs, alert areas, controlled firing areas, and parachute jump areas. These airspace areas, whether they overlap or adjoin, are identified on the charts by type and a specific name or number. The details, such as altitudes, time of use, and controlling agencies, are often provided in tables on sectional charts. Now, let's dive into the specifics of prohibited areas. These are sections of airspace where the flight of aircraft is entirely prohibited due to security or other reasons related to national welfare. You'll find them marked with a P, followed by a number on sectional charts. Take a look at restricted areas, which are places where operations could be hazardous to non-participating aircraft. While not entirely prohibited, there are restrictions in place. These areas often involve unique hazards like artillery firing or aerial gunnery. Penetrating restricted areas without proper authorization can be illegal and extremely hazardous. On sectional charts, restricted areas are identified by an R, followed by a number. When it comes to dealing with restricted areas, air traffic control follows specific procedures. If a restricted area is not active and has been released to the FAA, aircraft can operate in that area without a specific clearance. However, if the restricted area is active and not released to the FAA, ATC will issue a clearance to ensure the aircraft avoids that airspace. That's the lowdown on special use airspace, prohibited areas, and restricted areas. Always crucial to stay informed and follow the procedures to ensure safe and legal flight operations. Let's continue exploring more about special use airspace, specifically focusing on warning areas, military operations areas, MOAs, alert areas, controlled firing areas, and parachute jump areas. Warning areas are sections of airspace beyond the 3-mile limit that may contain hazards to non-participating aircraft in international airspace. The activities in these areas can be similar to those in restricted areas, and they are depicted on sectional charts. Military operations areas, MOAs, have defined vertical and lateral limits to separate certain military training activities from IFR traffic. While there's no restriction against VFR operations in these areas, pilots should stay alert as training activities may include acrobatic and abrupt maneuvers. MOAs are named and have defined boundaries on sectional, VFR terminal area, and en route low-altitude charts. They are not numbered, and examples include Churchill High MOA and Ranch MOA. You can find details like times of operation, affected altitudes, and the controlling agency frequency on sectional charts. Alert areas, marked with an A, followed by a number e.g., a 211 inches, are depicted on sectional charts to inform non-participating pilots of areas with a high volume of pilot training or unusual aerial activity. Pilots should be especially alert when flying in these areas, and all activities within an alert area must comply with regulations without waiver. Controlled firing areas are designated for military activities that could be hazardous to non-participating aircraft if not conducted in a controlled environment. The key difference is that activities must be suspended if a spotter aircraft, radar, or ground lookout indicates an approaching aircraft. Parachute jump areas are published in the Airport Facility Directory, AFD, with frequently used sites depicted on sectional charts. Pilots should listen to the appropriate airport radio frequency for parachute operations and be vigilant for aircraft conducting parachute activities. In the vicinity of airports without a control tower but with a flight service station, FSS, there's what they call a local airport advisory. This area spans about 10 statute miles, and the FSS provides advisory services to aircraft coming and going. Now, military training routes, MTRs, are crucial for our national security. These routes, typically below 10,000 feet, are where the military hones their airborne tactics. You'll spot them on sectional charts marked with gray lines and labeled as IFR, IR, and VFR, VR, followed by a number. Temporary flight restrictions, TFRs, come into play when there's a potential threat or disruption in the airspace. Whether it's a forest fire, chemical accident, or a disaster relief effort, TFRs are issued as notices to airmen, NOTAMs. Pilots need to check these before flying to ensure a smooth journey. When it comes to radar services, Terminal Radar Service Areas, TRSAs, provide extra support for pilots. The primary airports in a TRSA becomes Class D airspace, and you'll see these areas marked on charts with solid black lines. National Security Areas, NSAs, are special zones set up to beef up security around specific ground facilities. Flying in these areas might be temporarily prohibited under certain regulations, and this information is usually communicated through NOTAMs. Lastly, there are published VFR routes, sort of like designated pathways for navigating tricky airspace. Whether it's a VFR flyway, VFR corridor, or a Class B airspace route, these are often found on VFR terminal area planning charts. In a nutshell, staying informed about these airspace areas is crucial for pilots to ensure not just a safe but also a compliant flight. If there are ever questions or a need for more information, reaching out to relevant authorities or flight service resources is always a good idea. Flying over certain U.S. wildlife refuges, parks, and Forest Service areas comes with a set of rules. You can't just land anywhere. It needs authorization from the respective agency unless it's an emergency, at an official landing site, or for approved federal government business. Plus, maintaining a minimum altitude of 2,000 feet above specific areas administered by different agencies is strongly encouraged for safety. When it comes to pre-flight planning for weight shift control operations, local flights might just involve Class G and Class E airspace, focusing on visibility and cloud clearance requirements. But if you're heading to controlled airspace or airports with control towers, equipment requirements and pilot qualifications need to be on your checklist. Air traffic control plays a significant role when you're sharing the sky. In non-towered airspace, it's the pilot's responsibility to maintain separation from other aircraft. However, in controlled airspace, collaboration with air traffic control is essential. Communicating your weight shift control aircraft's capabilities, especially its airspeed and surface wind limits, helps ensure safe operations. Understanding airspace dimensions, entry requirements, and geographical locations is crucial. The sectional chart is your go-to tool for this. Navigating airspace involves pilotage, using landmarks to determine your location. It's about combining pre-flight planning with in-flight situational awareness. Fuel planning is vital for any flight, and for weight shift control aircraft, the slower speed makes wind considerations even more critical. While regulations require a minimum of 30 minutes of reserve fuel for intended fuel stops, this is a good practice for weight shift control aircraft too. Many weight shift control pilots rely on GPS for navigation. It's convenient and cost-effective, but always cross-reference with the sectional chart, as discrepancies may exist. Remember, GPS is a backup aid, and pilotage remains the primary navigation method. In the end, operating a weight shift control aircraft in the National Airspace System, NOAS, is very much doable with the right knowledge, courtesy, and common sense. Understanding airspace, making informed decisions, and respecting the needs of fellow sky users are key to a successful and conflict-free experience.